We have Melanie Trimble with us this evening, and she's going to be talking about the Equal Rights Amendment. Melanie Trimble graduated from Simmons College and went on to teach mathematics for 7 years. When she moved to the Albany area, she volunteered for the League of Women Voters of Albany County, and she began working in the not-for-profit sector, joining the New York ACLU in 2003. She continues to work raising awareness around civil liberties in the capital region, and we certainly know at BNP how important that is. So thank you so much for coming, Melanie.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, so I was just talking earlier about when I first came into knowledge about the Bethlehem Neighbors for Peace. Of course, you guys started, I think, just after 2001. And you had me come speak about the USA Patriot Act just after I got my job. So it's like old time going back here to speak to you guys. But as you know, as you are unfortunately very well aware, that Roe v. Wade was overturned by the Supreme Court in June of 2022. And it severely limits women's access to reproductive health, reproductive health services. And New York State and its legislators decided that they should do something more than just the law that protects you now. We currently have a law in place that's called the Reproductive Health Act, which was to modernize our laws in case Roe v. Wade was overturned, put abortion law into the health law, and ensure that every woman has access to abortion services in New York State. However, the women's politicians have really taken this cause on in other states, and it's frightening to New York State legislators that we may have legislators who try and force through without a consensus of the people in the state to try and restrict abortion rights. So we felt it was very important to the New York State legislature to adopt a constitutional amendment to change the New York State Constitution to include protections for certain classes of people. And they not only wanted to protect a woman's right to choose and a woman's right to make decisions about her own pregnancies, they realized also that there were a lot of other groups excluded in the Constitution. Let me look at this. So the Constitution currently only protects the rights for race, color, creed, and religion. So the new ballot initiative will add ethnicity, national origin, age, disability, sex, including sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, pregnancy, pregnancy outcomes, and reproductive health care and autonomy. So it's a lot that we're adding, but these protections are very important so that we're not the victims of the whims of politicians who may be elected in this state. And we know that Long Island has its own set of politics. It can be very disruptive to the majority of the people in this state. So we want to make sure that this thing passes. So they spent 4 years adopting the measure, because you have, when you do a ballot, when you do a constitutional amendment, you have to have 2 separately elected legislative sessions to vote for it. So the Assembly and the Senate have to vote in favor. An election takes place, and then they have to do it again. Now in New York State, it happened very quickly because this is a very popular and very important measure. So it passed, and now it will go on the ballot in November. The glitch is that there was a female legislator. Her name is Marjorie Burns. I like to call her out. She's a Republican from Caledonia in Livingston County. And she sued the Senate and the Attorney General over this initiative because she claimed that the dates of the measure weren't properly enforced. So the Senate is supposed to apply to the New York State Attorney General for an opinion on the ballot measure, and then it goes back to the Senate and has to sit for a few days, and then they vote. That's what's in our laws, in the bylaws of the legislature. In this case, the legislature, the Senate, voted before they received the opinion from the New York State Attorney General. And the judge that this woman had shopped for in Livingston County decided in her favor. That because they did not time the vote properly, that the ballot measure would fail. So currently, that's the state of things, because we tried to get a stay to keep the ballot measure while we appealed the case, but we lost that opportunity. So when I say we, it's not just the Civil Liberties Union, it's like all the activists and all the legislators and judges and lawyers, they're all over this. So we do feel that it's going to be reinstated because the legislature for many years has voted on ballot measures in the same way for many years, and it's never been questioned. And so because it is the regular practice of the legislature to vote on it the way they did in this one, that we should prevail, and the ballot measure should be placed back on the November ballot. There are other arguments. That's not the only one, thank goodness, because you could say, well, that's kind of weak. But because the issue is so compelling, and one in which the legislators were wholly supportive, it's believed that a procedural snag should not prevent the ballot from moving forward, particularly since it's such an onerous process. Also noting that the suit itself was political, obviously, because she could have filed suit as soon as the ballot measure passed the Senate. And instead, she chose to wait until, I think it was March when she filed, which meant that the case may truly disrupt the ballot process. She had 2 years to do this, and she chose this spring. So we know what was going on in her mind. So let's see. Of course, the New York State Attorney General has filed an appeal, and they will most likely win. And all of the activist groups, they call it the Ballot Initiative Committee, of which the League of Women Voters and Upper Planned Parenthood and the New York Civil Liberties Union, we are all members of what's called the Ballot Initiative Committee. And this Ballot Initiative Committee has decided that despite the fact that the ballot measure is not currently on for November, we are going to proceed as though it will be, because it's going to take a lot of time and energy to get people aware of the ballot measure and voting in favor of it. As most of you know, because you're very politically savvy, ballot measures often fail because the wording of it is very vague and people don't really get the 3 sentences that are written as to what the issue is really about. They're not educated about it, so they are afraid to vote either in favor or against, so they just don't vote, which makes usually the no votes more powerful. And so we want to make sure that people are well aware that this is something that they would want to vote for if you believe in human rights and civil rights and the rights of everybody. So that's what we're doing. We're going around, we're talking about it. We know that we're going to have a very, very big push in late September, all of October, and of course for the ballot issue in November, just to get people to turn their ballot over and vote. In order to pass the ballot measure, we just need more yeses than nos. So if you know somebody that's very opposed to abortion, or is very anti-trans, which we hear about a lot these days, just don't talk about it with them. Because they'll forget to turn it over, and we don't have to deal with another no vote. And I know that sounds a little, a little cynical, but it is something that you need to really consider. You're not going to change people's minds on those issues, so there's no point in pursuing it to try and change a mind. The majority of New Yorkers, if they vote, even just the voters in New York, which by the way is pretty dismal, but if just the voters in New York vote, the majority will vote in favor of this amendment. We already know that. So we're just trying to get people aware of it and make sure that you don't have to change people's minds. The Board of Elections, luckily, has chosen to go ahead with writing the language that you're going to see on the ballot. And we wanted to make sure as activists, the ballot initiative committee was working with the Board of Elections to try and get it to be as plain, simple language, declarative sentences that make it so clear about what it's about, and it would be very compelling. So they're still working on the wording, and on July 5th, they're going to release their language to the public. And after July 5th, for the next 2 weeks, there's a public comment period. So you're all very active here. You should get on the Board of Elections website and comment about the language. And if you have any objections to the way it's worded, or questions or concerns, you can put them there, and they'll consider them for 2 weeks. So then, how do we continue to keep people informed? Well, first of all, I'm sure that some of you are members of other groups. I can go and talk to groups. I have a bunch of people that work with me as volunteers that will go and do a presentation in the ERA, so please consider that. If you'd like, you can have a house party, a dinner party for your friends and talk about it, and I would be happy to come by for a few minutes. I would be happy to get somebody else up to steam if you wanted to. I could train you on how to present on this issue. So that's really what we're trying to do, is build a volunteer base that will go out and chat. There is one caveat to the ballot initiative. It is treated under campaign finance laws as though it's a candidate. So if you donate to the ERA campaign, say you really want to put out pamphlets on this, or give buttons out, or make t-shirts, so you're going to donate to that. That is not a taxable, tax-deductible donation, because this is treated as though it's a political candidate. So even in-kind contributions, which we had talked about at a meeting a few weeks ago, somebody wants to throw a party, an afternoon soiree, and they want somebody to help them pay for the food. So they came to the Liberties Union. We can't do that. We are looking into it. We've been told not yet. And a lot of people said, then let me make an in-kind contribution, maybe just to you, and we can't do that. So there are very big financial restrictions on education for the ERA. I have to report every hour that I work on ERA in my work on a separate thing, and I have to account for any time or money spent, like just copying these flyers. I have to charge it, because this is just so sad, but the opposition is so determined to disrupt the process that they're looking at everything that we're doing. Just like the lawsuit, they're trying to find every crack in the wall to try and get the ballot measure to fit. It's not a big group of people, but they're very well educated and very nuanced and specific on what they're attacking. So we have to be very careful. And so that's why reporting and making sure that we don't violate the campaign finance rules is very important to the BIC, the Ballot Initiative Committee. And so it's not as free-feeling as other campaigns that I've worked on, which have been tremendous. This is a very serious campaign, and if we fail, it's thought of that we will not prevail a second time. Now, also, on a nicer note, I mean, I think it's going to pass. I really do. If we do what we're supposed to do, we're certainly going to get a lot of people out voting and turning that ballot over to vote. So, we fully expect that it will. And by passing this measure in New York State, it speaks to the nation. It speaks to the other states who are strongly blue, that want to protect a woman's right to choose and have not considered an amendment. The next step in trying to get all these other states that are pretty much in majority Democratic to vote for their own equal rights amendment is, let's bring back the Equal Rights Amendment of what, 1973, and try and get it passed. That was a real, I was just reading a little bit about it the other day, and believe me, it's actually a pretty interesting process. And it really was a political statement that was sort of based in racism. And it would be nice to have a national ERA, but we sort of have to get through this division, I think, to actually pass it. But anyway, New York State will set an example for the rest of the country, and we're hoping that at least in more pockets of the states, you know, of the country, that we have protected a woman's right to choose, and also LGBTQ rights and ageism, everything. You know, we're throwing it all in there. So, does anybody have any questions? Yeah.
Is there any other state that's working on something similar?
Ohio just passed one. Yes, and you know, their ballot initiative committee was very worried because it's not as blue a state as New York. And they went out and they worked so hard, and we shipped people in to help them from New York, you know. It did pass. We're very happy by a rather large margin. So we're very confident that if we get it back on the ballot, that it will pass. We just have to make sure that the opposition doesn't take a strong foothold, which it may in Long Island. And they're saying, oh, well, Long Island voters are too small a population. They're not really going to influence the vote. Well, more people in Long Island will vote as long as the opposition doesn't make it too big a stink. The thing is that, you know, the things they are saying that this amendment would do are pretty horrific. You know, taking away parental rights about their child's medical needs. So not true. As a matter of fact, it protects the parents from any influence from the government making medical decisions for them and their family. And, you know, there are a couple of other naysaying things that I don't even like to mention because we can all imagine what they are, first of all. And secondly, it just gives you a negative connotation. So if you hear conversations of opposition and you don't know how to respond, call me. I've got a million things, lots and lots of materials that I can provide to you. So on the table are some cards. There's an article about the lawsuit, and it's pretty informative. It was a good article. It was done in the Times Union the day the decision was rendered. There is the Senate version of the actual bill. So it's interesting to just see what they crossed out and what they wrote in, you know. I don't know if you know how legislation is written, but it's always based upon something previous. So usually you're just taking out, striking words and putting in new words. So that's interesting. And then there's a one-pager on it that you're welcome to take because it's often easy just to hand somebody a piece of paper that describes the whole thing. And then there's the legislative memo that the ACLU wrote, which explains in pretty lots of detail why it's an important measure to vote for. Any other questions? Yeah?
I'm also confused about what the state court can do when the state has something like that already. Can they overturn it in every state?
No, state law is based upon the state constitution. And judges in the state need to follow the constitution when they are deciding things. And if it's a law, if it's something that there's a case in which they're creating new law, they still must abide by the tenets of the New York State Constitution. So the Constitution overrules any judge's whimsical way of dealing with things. And that's why I think our Court of Appeals right now is better than it was about 5 years ago. The appellate division is still pretty, you know, not so great that I hear from other lawyers because I don't argue these cases. I just go and watch them, which is kind of interesting. Yeah.
forgive me because I don't understand anything, but since you're a lawyer, I
Well, I'm not a
you
lawyer.
can ask the simple questions, okay? No pregnant person shall be denied equal protection of the laws or be subject to any discrimination in their civil rights. What does that mean?
It means that they can make their own personal decisions about their body without the government interfering. The government can't tell you that you need to carry a baby to term. It is your decision as to whether or not you're going to do that. The government cannot prosecute you because you decided to have an abortion, which is now happening in other states where they're being criminally prosecuted for deciding to terminate a pregnancy. There's also a really crazy lawsuit that's going on where a gentleman is suing his girlfriend for going out of state to get an abortion because the state in which she resided would not provide her with one. So that's going to be interesting. That's a Texas case. We'll see how that pans out. But that's what it's going to protect, is that a woman can make the choices for her own body without the government interfering.
What's the enforcement mechanism?
Well, first of all, a woman isn't going to go to jail because she's pregnant. That will never happen. If it did, of course, the courts would take care of it, and I'm sure very good attorneys would represent the person who's being judged that way. I guess the harder thing would be to say, what are you going to do if a woman has an abortion and you disagree with it? You know, you can't undo that. That's what the Texas law is trying to do, and it's not going to work. So the recourse really is within the state of laws. If you establish these rights within the New York State Constitution, then the law of the land is that. And if something happens, a case comes along where a government, and it would have to be the government in this case, or maybe even just a medical doctor, refuses to provide care, you know, because the state says, no, you can't discriminate against a woman because she's making a decision that you don't agree with. She has a right to make her own decision. And so we will take the doctor aside, maybe take his license away. I don't know what the legal recourse would be, but there are legal avenues to make sure that these rights are protected in the Constitution. Does that answer your question?
So would they have to do full reproductive care at St. Peter's?
Oh boy, you know, I've been working
Yeah,
on
oh
this
boy.
hospital murder thing. It is a really big problem. Because these hospitals are private and not state-run. You know, they don't get any funding from the state. Well, even if they get funding from the state, it's not one that dictates how they can run their hospital. What's happened with hospital mergers like this is, no, we can't, the answer is no. We cannot compel a hospital to provide abortion services when they refuse to do so, right? But what we can do is attack their pockets and the commercial part of it. So the hospitals that are privately run have to have funding. They need to have patients, and they need you to come and pay them the money. You know, whether it's your Medicare or whatever is paying for your insurance companies, they need that money. So, you know, as we've seen Ellis sort of decide what to do with Bellevue, it's pretty clear that they know that they need that money. Bellevue is a money maker. Now, Burdett is another story. Do you guys know about Burdett? Burdett is a birthing center over in Troy that's a part of, I think, Samaritan.
St. Mary's.
Sure. St. Mary's. And it's really run by the Catholic diocese. So they wanted to close Burdett, much to the chagrin of it. I mean, it's such a successful birthing center, and there is no place else in Troy to give birth. You have to come to Albany, you know, to do that, or go up to Saratoga. And so it was the community just came together like I've never seen it before, and it was really dramatic. And we had a big panel discussion with the Attorney General's office, who was very concerned about the shrinking of health care, particularly for reproductive health for women. And the hospital decided to keep Burdett open for 2 more years. 5? I thought it was only 2. excellent. Now, where they're gonna get the, these are just promises made. There's nothing that holds them to do it. But it would, over the next 5 years, we're going to really need to show what a value it is to the community, and also to get the Department of Health to stand up and start doing something about not only hospital mergers with Catholic institutions, but hospital closures. There's some areas that are hospital deserts, healthcare deserts, where it's very, very difficult in New York State to get the care that you need without driving for a few hours, no public transportation available. So it's really, and it's not growing. It's a market that is completely shrinking. Healthcare is out of control price-wise. The government doesn't really want to pay for it, although Obamacare helped a tremendous amount. The hospitals would have been closing much more quickly had we not had that, the safety net for people. So it's an ongoing battle. I hope you join us. Let me take her and then I'll get back to you. Yeah.
So are any of the states working on that original Equal Rights Amendment? Wasn't it like 30 maybe states have passed it? Or is there any hope for that? And what are the differences between that and what you're working on for New York?
Well, it's actually the same, but it would be national, and it would mean that every single state, whether they voted for the Equal Rights Amendment, to ratify it or not, I'm talking the national one, they would have to abide by the laws. It would be written in our Constitution. Again, just like in New York State, those laws cannot be changed at the whim of politicians. They can only be changed by a majority vote on a ballot initiative, and that's really hard to do. Now, as far as the National Equal Rights Amendment, I have to do my research. I am not clear that those 30 states that passed it the first time have to re-vote on it. If it's exactly the same, and I doubt that it will be exactly the same, because in 1973, I don't think we knew about transgender individuals needing protections, and that would have to be. I cannot believe that we as a nation would want to pass an Equal Rights Amendment that didn't include everything. I think it would be a waste of time. So we'll see. Yeah.
For the conversation I might be having with other people, is there a limit as to how late a woman could terminate in this?
Okay. It's been so long since I did the Reproductive Health Act. I am not completely certain, but from what I know is, yes, you can terminate at any time, okay, including the last 3 months of your pregnancy, particularly if it's the health of the child and the health of the mother. Many of us know that there have been, when I was working on the Reproductive Health Act, I can't tell you how many absolute horror stories I heard of women who had to bring to term a baby that had died in month 3. Can you imagine what a seriously traumatic episode that must be in a woman's life, And so the provisions are there so that the decisions, and it may sound horrible, oh my God, you could have an abortion with an 8-month-old baby inside of you. Well, probably not unless there's something really, really wrong with the child or really, really wrong with the mom or both. These are decisions that should be made by health professionals and their families.
In essence, it could be a C-section too. They could do a C-section, and it would.
Yeah, you might go through.
I just know that there will be people who will.
Oh, there are going to be. These are the arguments that we get, the arguments about pregnancy. But what we want people to understand is that these decisions are so difficult to make for women. Women are not deciding willy-nilly to have abortions when they get pregnant. It's not a form of birth control as the right would want you to believe. And it's just very important, especially with all the nuances in medicine, to let your doctor, to have the doctor and the family make these decisions, and the government should not interfere. They are trained in medicine. They should not be dictating what you can do with your body.
So will the insurance companies have a say? in
Well, the
what they
insurance
do?
companies do anything you want them to do as long as they're gonna make some money. So, you know, I don't know of any Catholic-owned insurance company. I do know that I think there's a decision that the Supreme Court made, is it, it's not Chick-fil-A, it's the other one.
Hobby Lobby?
Hobby Lobby. Hobby Lobby could, you know, they decided that they could not provide reproductive health services in their insurance policy. But that's that company making that decision, not the insurance companies. The insurance companies do what the companies or what you as a person want to be insured for, not necessarily you as a person, but you as your collective, like I'm covered by Cigna. Cigna makes decisions based upon their group of people that they need to insure.
Is there anything that can be done or is being done to stop the proliferation of Catholic institutions merging with 6 other hospitals so that they have that?
Well, that's what we're
Management
working
role.
with the Attorney General on, particularly with these mergers that have occurred just in this local area. It's really precarious. We are losing a lot of services and a lot of rights for women. And, by the way, LGBT services, they're non-existent here. The very, very few that we have are provided by, you know, non-Catholic institutions. So that's another danger too, that they're losing services, and also the right to die. And I know palliative care is extremely important to people. It's a way to help people who are dying be comfortable and, you know, secure and feeling that their lives are under their own control. And that's something that a Catholic hospital will not provide. I was talking to Corinne Carey, who is with Compassion and Choices. It's an advocacy group that is advocating for a right to choose when to die. And she said, which I thought was the most shocking thing, she said Catholic hospitals believe in suffering, that suffering is part of your glory to God or something. And I'm such an atheist, I'm so sorry. But yeah, I just couldn't believe that that was actually in some literature, that suffering is part of.
Probably has something to do with Jesus on the cross.
Yes, yes. That you, without suffering, you don't really appreciate your life. And so, yes.
But St. Peter's seems to have the hospice service like the area, unless I'm mistaken, so.
Yeah,
And it's big.
Yeah, it's very big. It's one of the largest in the area. You're right. I have no idea what their care is like. So just be careful. You know, particularly if this compassionate care bill does pass, those choices will not be afforded to you at that hospital. You would have to be transferred, and at which point you really want to change your setting, you know, change your hospice setting, because you get pretty comfortable.
Interject in there?
Yeah.
Because my mom lived with us for 5 years, and at the end of her life, she had a sudden incident and was in the hospital for a couple of weeks and then came home, thinking we thought she would die at home in hospice care. And her doctor, her own personal doctor, stopped her medications and her pain relievers. And the nurses said to me, we need you to get her back in the hospital where we can control her health care. Well, she went back in the hospital on a Sunday afternoon.
Back into St. Peter's.
St.
St.
Peter's.
Peter's.
They put her on morphine the
Morphine.
second she was in the bed, and she was gone in 4 days. I was shocked that we were in St. Peter's and experiencing that. But that was our own personal
Yeah,
experience.
you know, hospice it may be a separate animal at the, you know, I don't know how
Yeah,
they
maybe it
organized
is.
it business-wise, but, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's fun, actually. I think it is funded separately, perhaps.
It might be, which is,
Okay.
and believe me, we're trying to figure out how to carve out Bellevue,
Yeah.
because it's a very successful, very popular place to give birth. It's got wonderful services and it's an entity of its own, so it's got nice, rooms to have a baby in and all that sort of stuff. So we really would like to see it maintain its autonomy, particularly when it comes to, like, the biggest issue I think for women who actually give birth and what they want after birth. A lot of women would like, if they're having a C-section, to get a tube ligation, which would tie their tubes and they never have to worry about getting pregnant again. Catholic hospitals will not provide that, so you can have your baby at Ellis or at St. Peter's, and you'll have to go to another hospital for that operation and have a second operation. So, those type, and there are a lot of other services that I used to know a lot about, but I forget. Well, Ellis is merging with St. Peter's. So, and a lot of them, we've gotten some really interesting anecdotal stories about the whole, they're not being very transparent about it. We knew Ellis was losing money forever, but ending these services and merging with the Catholic health system is probably not going to help them. And then with the Catholic hospitals swallowing up all these other secular hospitals, are they really financially stable? They could just as easily collapse. So we need to be careful. And we'd like the Department of Health and the Attorney General of New York State to establish firm guidelines for mergers, that they have to be transparent, that you cannot close a hospital in a health desert, and make some rules about it, because they never had to. Hospitals were money making, they had plenty of people to come, but our health has improved a lot, even into, it has over the years. We tend to live longer, we tend to live better, and so the hospitals are not getting the money that they need in order to sustain themselves, because we're just not that unhealthy anymore. So it's a weird formula, but that's what it is. Yeah.
I just wanted to mention, my husband died of Parkinson's disease, and he went to St. Peter's. At the end of his life, he had pneumonia, which he got over, but he gave up drinking. So that's how he died. I don't think I think it's something that has to do with the medication.
And the hospital didn't force him to eat or drink, they just let him out those sessions and stuff. That's good. Then palliative care is usually where a doctor comes in and allows you to make whatever choices you like. And they're going to make you as comfortable as possible with whatever choice you choose. So if you choose no longer eating, they're going to make sure that you get proper medication to not make it painful for you. That's what the kind of care that most hospitals would provide. I'm not sure.
They would moisten the mouth and things like that.
Yeah, very important.
He was in hospice care. I was in hospice care. Hospice is part of
Yeah, I don't exactly know the difference either, but I have met, because I've had some problems with friends dying, and their home health care hospice people call palliative care doctors. So I don't know, maybe it's just a name for the doctor or a way to describe the doctor who works in hospice, but they're there to make sure you're as comfortable as possible. Okay.
So if I understand your last answer, if I show up at St. Peter's today for full reproductive care, I won't get it. But after the ERA passes, I won't get it either.
You will not
So
get it.
could you tell us what is going to change by the ERA?
Because other hospitals and laws will make sure that they can provide you that care.
Well,
may
which
not be able to
hospitals are not
stop-
providing it already?
The Catholic hospitals.
No, but the ones that are going to be affected by the ERA. I'm asking what the
Okay,
ERA
all
will
right,
change.
here, I know. In New York, We already have the Reproductive Health Act that compels every hospital, except those that are privately owned Catholic hospitals, to provide full reproductive health care for women. That's the lay of the land. So there's nothing wrong right now with the care that we get. What we don't want is the political whim of the climate to be able to take those rights away. We've already had, it's very, very rare that the courts, in particular the Supreme Court, shrinks our rights. They did it with Roe because it wasn't protected in the Constitution. You can't shrink the rights in the Constitution, or it's very, very hard to do so. So we want to make sure that all of these rights are protected in the Constitution so that the courts and the whim of politicians cannot change that. Now, I'll take you.
So, you said that around July 5th, there'll be, wording will come out.
Yes.
And there will be a 2-week period in which we can look at it and say something. Besides that, what can we do to ensure that the employees are
Get the word out. And that's one thing that we're really trying to do is engage all of you who are very politically savvy and involved to spread the word. So have people to dinner, talk about it wherever you go, wear a button, show up at tabling events. You can even help us table. We're tabling at both of the Pride events and Juneteenth. To try and there are many other groups that are working with us, Planned Parenthood, as I said, and League of Women Voters. So they'll be having events too. And it's really just making sure that in November, people turn the ballot over. We are going to be doing phone banking, particularly when it gets back on the ballot, for sure we get lists of people that we can call, and you sit in a call room and it automatically dials these numbers. It's actually a pretty easy thing to do. And most people, when you mention right up front you're not asking for money, they're willing to listen to you if you want to talk. And the people who don't want to pick up the phone or listen, it bypasses it. You don't ever get a person that doesn't want to answer the phone. I think phone banking is old-fashioned. I think it's kind of weird that they're doing it because text messages are the way everybody communicates these days. So they're working on that, and they're also working on a big social media campaign. And that's another thing what the ERA wants to raise a lot of money for, are commercials. Again, I think if you're not on the streaming services, young people aren't watching you. So it's a little concern to me that they're going to spend that much money on television advertising when they really should be focused on social media. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm in a campaign myself, and one thing that I've discovered and that I've had people say, the text things, they're really going away. People would rather have calls than texts because it is being used
Too much.
so much. It's like I'm getting texts from Oregon and Illinois for people I've never even heard of, and people are getting all kinds of texts and they don't want them. So I'm just saying, it's just something to consider when you're looking into the texts.
Yeah, I know the BIC, the Ballot Initiative Committee, has received so much input, and they're paying all these consultants like crazy money to help them figure out what are the demographics, where do we need to go, what do we need to do, because they don't want any risk like happened in Ohio. Ohioans are panicked at the end, although they didn't really need to. But when you think about it, what is the best way to communicate with young people? And I gotta say, they're all on social media, maybe not texting, but you gotta put something really compelling out there
Instagram.
that they
It
then,
changes every time.
retweeting, re-Xing, whatever.
Yeah. Well,
I don't
people
do any of it.
Don't text anymore because people can see it. So they went to, another texting service because that's more difficult because it's encrypted. But that one's owned by Facebook and they're giving you information anyway. So we went to another one, Signal, and
Oh, yeah.
it seems to be changing every few months. And really what the situation is you got to keep up with what it is. You've got to change it all the time.
I mean, particularly, I've been through so many different ways of working since 2003 to now. And even now, they'll bring in something new. You know, we were using Teams for a while, then they were like, oh no, let's use something else, Signal. I'm like, huh. You know, this is another platform that you have to learn how to use. And I'm just not that facile anymore, you know? And so it's been a real challenge. Pretty interesting, because even younger people are being frustrated by how many times we change the platform, you know? So, anyway, yeah, it's an issue. I'm hoping they're all really smart people.
Well, what civil libertarians have to do is stop them, is do a campaign to stop them from using algorithms, taking your information. I mean, we just did some home improvement stuff. Nothing to do with the computer at all. But on my Facebook feed, I now have, you know, dozens of home improvement things that are coming to my Facebook feed.
Oh my
How
God.
they know about that, I don't know.
I don't know either. It
But-
happens all the time, and everybody complains about it. Like, you could have, you know, put a lawn sign on your lawn, and suddenly all these political ads start popping up, and you're like, what's going on? You know, and as far as privacy rights, you know, I have lots of people, especially talking about the USA Patriot, my privacy rights. I'm like, they're gone. They're gone. You know, anybody can find you, anybody can figure out who you are. You know, it's really amazing. You know, don't have any expectation of privacy. Now, there are laws protecting your privacy rights, but people forget it's expensive to hire an attorney. So if you want to fight an entity that has invaded your privacy, it's really super difficult and super expensive. So,
I had my love about this man mentioned that this Supreme Court Justice, the black man,
Thomas?
yeah, he talked about birth control. So if men wanted to, so if men wanted to practice birth control, that's actually, thank you. They wouldn't be protected on this, they would have to have,
I don't know of any state that restricts men's access to reproductive health. I don't know of any laws that would restrict a man from getting a vasectomy, access to contraception. It's much more, much easier.
Peters do a vasectomy.
See, the thing is, you know, I wonder about that.
Yeah, that would be a very interesting thing, because that would show.
That would show the duplicity, right?
Yes.
Okay, you can, right. So, I'd have to do some research on that, because that's an interesting question. So, because of that, I don't think, these laws will protect anybody's rights to reproductive health care, and that includes men. So, but they don't mean that they haven't in the past needed it. Who knows what's going to happen? Who knew we'd be in this situation? It's crazy.
so that'll be protected.
So what?
That'll be protected,
Yeah. They're particularly protected as parents with this new way the laws are for autonomy and healthcare autonomy. So, you know, it's very important that we adopt it. You don't have to take advantage of your rights if you don't want to, by the way. So if you're against abortion, you don't have to get one. Nobody's going to, you know, if you don't want palliative care, you don't have to. You know, it's a choice. But if you do, the state should not interfere with your access to it, and that's the most important. Yes? Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of tricky, but I'm just still thinking of conversations other people might be asking me about.
Okay.
I mean, there's children or people who want to have their 14-year-old child go through hormonal therapy or whatever. And how is that covered in this, or how isn't it? It's up to the parent.
Yeah, well,
I mean, there's a thing in here
children-
about age, so
It
does
is.
that mean?
Well, as I understand it, children do not come of age until they're 18, in some cases 16, and that's a really weird thing because of the criminal law, but anyway, don't worry about that. So parents have ultimate rights over their children, and that will remain with this piece of legislation. What we want to do is make sure that the parents and the child and the medical community can make decisions, intelligent, well-informed decisions about their future health and mental health without interference from the government. And this will ensure that. So it gives parents much more rights as parents. It's, you know, you think a 13-year-old is going to come out and say, I want to be emancipated from my parents in order to go through this change. Now that's a whole legal issue that I don't think the ERA is going to settle. That would be something up to the courts to decide whether they can determine the person's not of age and what kind of access they have. Because you can imagine, I mean, you know that the suicide rate among transgender individuals is astronomically high, and it's exceptionally high for teenage kids. Kids that are going through puberty that do not feel comfortable in the body that they currently have. And it is so devastating that they do consider suicide. That's a health concern. You know, we shouldn't have so many people wanting to die because they can't make choices about their body. So you can imagine that maybe well into the future, some child may be in a situation where, and I think it actually has happened in other states that don't provide or prevent parents from making this decision for the children, where it becomes really troublesome. And the children want to take advantage of the law and see how far they can push it. So, we will see. But for the most part, those rights will be protected and the parents can make decisions without government interference.
Just a quick comment, the government interference, it seems like a really conservative talking point. You would think that a lot of people would actually say that. Yeah, I don't want the government in my healthcare. I don't want my government doing this. So I mean, it's actually a talking point that can be used for
I know.
conservatives.
It's actually the irony of it all. They want to shrink government, except in the places where they're going to interfere with people's fundamental human rights. I mean, that's just theological to me.
I was just going to ask if we wanted to do, like, get a bunch of the social justice groups together, these groups, and do like a potluck or something like that, would we be able to take donations and then donate them or not?
Gosh, okay. You can take donations, but they have to understand that they're not tax deductible donations.
Right.
But that would be fine. Like, one of my friends is going to have an afternoon party, and she said, can I pass the hat? You know, just to pay for the refreshments. And I'm not going to give it to ACLU, I'm not going to give it to the BIC, I'm just going to take it as a subsidy for me. I was like, I'll check with our attorneys, but I'm pretty sure that's okay because it's a private residence, you can do what you like, you know, as long as you're not trying to deduct it on your taxes. I gotta say, the IRS, the thing is that the opposition in New York State will be looking very closely at that in order to say that they can overturn it because the ballot initiative effort was interfered with and not done properly. So we have to be very careful.
Money aside, I think that this issue is really important, and I don't think we know enough about it. I think this has been very informative.
Oh, good.
Very great.
Yes.
To repeat, Melanie, we could give the money to you or whoever. I've heard, I'm confused,
Yeah.
but not take a deduction. Is that-
Exactly.
oh, then
Yeah, it's like you can't,
the way
like,
it is.
it's the same rule as donating to a candidate. You can give as much money as, well, not as much money, you know, there are
Yeah.
certain limits.
Unless you're a
but-
corporation,
Yeah,
you
then
can
you
give as
can
much
give
money.
But there are limits on what you can give, but it would be the same rules that apply to
Okay.
candidacy as it does to the BIC. And there will be fundraising soon enough. My company is probably not going to enter into that agreement with it. I don't think we want to entangle. We already have, you know, we have enough problems trying to not get in trouble with people for donations and things like that, so. Like the BIC did. Yeah.
Just an observation, really. I'm British. We have a National Health Service. I listen to you, I have been going through the health system here. I'm totally bewildered by everything. And it is so stupidly complicated. It is so not joined up that I don't know how people even get the right health care here.
Oh my goodness, there are courses that you can take.
Ah,
You know, when
Of course.
seriously, when you have to make a choice, like I'm privately insured, so when I turned 65, I didn't have to worry about the transition to a governmental health plan. Not yet. But when you do, you really need to know, do I want D? Do I want Part A? What is B all about? I have to pay a little bit for C, you know. What is going to be best for you is not going to be best for me. You know, they have to check out your financial circumstances and where your assets are. I mean, it's just crazy. So yeah, there are courses about
It
it.
is the height of stupidity. It really is. I just wanted to mention that. Because,
Well,
you know,
you know,
I go to a doctor, right? The doctor says, I think you need a background there, maybe something. Then the doctor sends me to down in the same hospital, like that. I get referred to an oncologist. I get referred to a plastic surgeon. I get referred to whoever I need from the same place. I don't have to constantly give out my name and address and my insurance every time I walk out of the door. I don't have to pay. And in Wales, I even get my prescriptions free. So I have a system. Yeah, I know. And we can do that in most of the whole country. So it's not. It's only politics.
well, I think though that we're moving in that direction because the HMOs have become so huge and very popular. And I don't know how, I mean, community care, which is just down the street here, does have its own imaging. So if you need an X-ray or I don't think they do MRIs, but they do a lot of the stuff, blood testing and physical therapy and stuff, and the hearing tests. You know, all under one roof, and being part of this whole like Albany Med umbrella, I don't have to repeat my name and circumstances and re-sign up for a doctor. So I think those services are improving. It's people that get very Cadillac care insurance, where they're using only private doctors and not HMOs, and they're finding that it's not less care, because of course you're getting the best care possible. However, you have to go to an individual doctor each time, and it's not part of a unit in which they communicate with one another. Like I can go into my doctor for an annual, and she knows she's been talking to my gynecologist, she's been talking to my ear, nose, and throat person, she's watching my medications with my skin doctor, you know.
So we ever found that? We found each time we go to one of these specialists, they have their own portals, their own sign-ins, and we have to find out that. And this doctor doesn't know what's there, and, you know, and you go for a blood test with one, and now it's, the other doctor said, go for a blood test, ask them to do these tests. And they said, oh, we don't do that anymore. So we have to go to a second blood test. I mean, it is
That's crazy.
very strange and very crazy, and it is true, because I'm over Britain a lot too, because my wife is British. And when I'm there, they don't even ask anything. They just give
treat
me
you.
care. And whatever doctor I go to, they can look in the computer and see what every other doctor does. There's no cash registers, there's nothing like that. And it's just such a
Well, I think that
difference.
when you look at the ideas for universal care, you know, a lot of them speak to just expanding the Medicare system, which would, it's the same kind of care. There's not that umbrella where everybody can communicate with one another about your medical issues if you give them permission, you know. So who knows? We're far away from it though.
We're far away, that's the problem.
It was nice when Obama was in office.
It's the profit element.
Yeah.
Well, the Obamacare, the insurance
helped.
companies wrote that.
Oh, yeah.
And they're,
Well, okay, who
they
had,
were,
I know all of this, who had the best healthcare proposal in all of the states? It was Mitt Romney in Massachusetts. He was the originator of the best healthcare plan that Americans could could stand at that point. You know, because we all are very money oriented, we think if we pay more for a doctor, we're getting better care. You know, we're sort of whacked that way, that's the way we're programmed, I guess. But, and then when he starts to run, he pretends he has no idea that he developed some of the best healthcare people in Massachusetts. Go figure. And I say it's after 8, I don't know if they have.
No, we don't.
Any other?
Sir?
Thank you so much.
Thanks for
It's been
having me.
very enlightening and
Very,
beautiful.
And there are volunteer cards over there, you can take them home, they have the QVC code on them, and that leads you right to our membership page, not a membership page, but a volunteer page. You can put in, you know, what you'd like to focus on, and you'll get targeted emails to things that you want to hear about from the Civil Liberties Union. So I recommend that, maybe just take a target there.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Joe and I have a couple of announcements to make. We are going to try to